Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. In the small, unremarkable town of Crestwood, the whispered secrets echoed faintly against the backdrop of rustling leaves and distant bird song. Nestled in the heart of southern Ohio, Crestwood was known for its tight-knit community and its annual fall festival, an event where neighbors gathered under the golden glow of autumn to share laughter and homemade pie. Life unfolded leisurely here, with days marked by routine and familiarity. Yet beneath the surface of this idyllic setting lurked a darkness that had long been buried. It was the fall of 1998 when the fragile veneer of Crestwood was shattered in an instant, leaving echoes of unanswered questions and fractured lives. The town that once relished its tranquil pace was thrust into chaos when 14-year-old Emma Russell vanished without a trace. Her mother, Barbara, reported her missing when Emma failed to return home after school. It was typical for Emma to bike around the neighborhood or spend time with friends. But on that fateful October afternoon, she didn't phone ahead. Panic gripped Barbara's heart as she called every house on their street, each unanswered doorbell igniting fears that spiraled out of control. The police were alerted soon after. They searched the nearby woods and questioned classmates, teachers, and neighbors, all the while hoping for the best but preparing for the worst. Emma was cherished. Her absence left an undeniable void. As the sun dipped below the horizon that day, the town began to realize that the darkness that had crept in was not just a fleeting shadow, but a reality they would all have to confront. The victim. Emma Russell was a bright spark in a town that often felt too quiet. With her curly chestnut hair and infectious laughter, she was the kind of teenager who brightened a room with her presence. Friends described her as someone who wore her heart on her sleeve, always eager to lend a hand to those in need. She had a penchant for reading mysteries and a talent for sketching, often filling her notebooks with drawings of fantastical creatures and serene landscapes. At school, Emma was an average student, but with aspirations that outshone her academics. She dreamed of becoming an artist, her senses primed to capture the world around her in vivid colors and breathtaking detail. Her teachers noted her enthusiasm during art class, where she would transform mundane objects into majestic scenes. Emma's world revolved around family and friends, spending weekends at the local diner with her best friend Sophie, where they would giggle over milkshakes and chatter about everything from pop culture to their budding dreams. But beneath her vibrant facade lay a typical teenage struggle. As she entered high school, the weight of fitting and pressed down on her slender shoulder. The friendship dynamics changed, and Emma often felt like an outsider, even among those she once considered close. The laughter that once came easily now trembled at the edges with insecurities. Those close to Emma knew she was dealing with the pressures of adolescence in her own way. Still, nothing could prepare them for the void that her disappearance would soon create. As the days of searching turned into weeks, the townsfolk were left grappling with the question that haunted every corner. Who would want to harm a girl like Emma, so full of light and potential? The answer, it seemed, was lurking just beneath the surface of their serene community. The crime scene. 3 days after Emma had vanished, the first sign of foul play emerged. The rhythmic hum of tree branches swaying in the autumn breeze was abruptly interrupted by a commotion as local authorities gathered at an unremarkable clearing within Crestwood. Within Crestwood was a place children frequented to escape into nature, now tainted with escape dread. The officers, clad in thick jackets to shield against the crisp air, carefully navigated the damp underbrush, their breaths visible as they conversed in low tones. The lead detective, Tom Harris, squinted into the dense thicket where a search dog had alerted on a curious scent. The anticipation hung heavy, warmer than the humid afternoon. This was uncharted territory, a place where innocence was now tainted by loss. As they approached, a low beep of a detector signaled something hidden beneath the damp earth. Digging carefully, they unearthed a small backpack, its fabric faded and frayed, a token from a life now lost. Inside were a diary filled with doodles, Emma's artistic touch still palpably an empty water bottle, and a half-eaten granola book. For the detectives, the pack contained a bittersweet glimpse into Emma's routine, a piece of her world, which now seemed so far removed from reality. The ground nearby yielded more than personal belongings. The unearthed talus hinted at an even more sinister truth. Scattered scrapings of what appeared to be dried leaves and soil, mixed with an unnatural presence, told a story of a struggle. Detective Harris could feel the weight of the moment pressing in, the sense of urgency that was palpable. Slowly, the mere suggestion of a crime morphed into the gloomy certainty that something terrible had happened. With the discovery marking the turning point in their investigation, the townspeople's horror grew. Crestwood, once simply a backdrop to Emma's playful escapades, had become the narrative of a chilling mystery that demanded swift resolution. As news spread, apprehension tightened its grip, weaving through the streets and unwrapping them in a shroud of fear. The early investigation. As the news of the crime scene spread like wildfire through Crestwood, Detective Harris focused intently on the early stage of an investigation that now had as much to do with understanding Emma's life as it did with uncovering the truth behind her disappearance. Finding answers would require digging deep into the fabric of the community, peeling back layers of familiarity to search for any signs of malevolence. Harris set up an operations center in the town hall, where the faint scent of fresh coffee mingled with the whispers of concerned residents. A whiteboard filled with pictures of Emma and a timeline of her last known movements lay at the center of it all. Early witness statements revealed that she had indeed left school that day, but had neither ventured to a friend's house nor returned home. Instead, it appeared she cycled towards the woods, an unusual destination for a girl who preferred the company of friends. The detective interviewed Emma's closest companions, including Sophie, her confidante. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the town hall, Sophie recounted how Emma had confided in her about feeling overwhelmed with life, a distant expression on her face. She was upset about fitting in and seemed more withdrawn lately, Sophie said, her voice shaking slightly. I thought it was just part of growing up. Detective Harris noted every detail: a vague threat from a classmate, a bitter rivalry, and the teasing that had intensified in recent weeks. All were threads that could lead to deeper tensions. The stories wove together, and although they provided leads, they also revealed a harsh truth. In a town that seemed so safe, the innocence of youth had been tarnished by the shadows of envy and suspicion. With each conversation, a cloud of urgency loomed larger. The detective would have to sift through layers of teenage angst, uncover secrets, and untangle the complex relationships that surrounded him. The investigation was just beginning, and he was keenly aware that the clock was ticking, its sound echoing in the back of his mind like a heartbeat, urging him onward in a race against time. The dead ends. Weeks passed since Emma's disappearance, and with each setting sun hope diminished like the fading light. Detective Harris and his team tirelessly scrutinized leads, examining every scrap of evidence. Yet every avenue of inquiry seemed to lead to an unsettling dead end. The fervent community support began to falter as frustrated families and friends reflected on their collective loss. A shadow stretching over Crestwood, dark and suffocating. Despite the fruitless search, Harris pressed on, sifting through layers of information. Interviews with classmates provided little more than vague recollections and informality. Frayed ties of camaraderie now laden with suspicion. The teens' reluctance to voice uncomfortable truths grew palpable. And Harris wondered if fear had woven a web that silenced them. What was unsaid lodged itself in his mind, pressing him to dig deeper. The detectives tracked down screen time records and found that Emma had recently been spending more time on social media. Knowing the power and perils of the online world, they combed through her digital footprints, but found little. Of the several conversations they traced, one stood out. It indicated conflict with an anonymous user, someone who claimed to know her secrets. Digging deeper prompted only further frustration. Leads that once seemed promising unraveled swiftly as investigators discovered that the accounts were fake, ghostly presences, lacking substance. The sense of futility became ever more evident as detectives scoured conveniences for surveillance footage, revealing nothing but the familiar rustle of leaves and the occasional passers-by people who had walked past obliviously during their daily routines. Routines of old Windsor approached. Hunger for closure gnawed at Harris's resolve. The case was spiraling into the depths of complexity. Each road led to rumors or shadows, skirting dangerously close to wild theories that threatened to unravel their community further. The absence of answers fueled suspicion and gossip among residents, the fear buried deep within their hearts, manifesting as bitterness and distrust. Yet, in the back of his mind, Harris knew that no matter how many dead ends he encountered, he had to maintain focus. For every unanswered question, there had to be a clue waiting patiently in the darkness. Just waiting for someone brave enough to shine a light on it. He could feel it often in the pit of his stomach. The idea that the truth had yet to be unveiled, waiting for him on the other side of the murk. A break in the case. Just as the somber chill of winter settled over Crestwood, the investigation stumbled unexpectedly into the warmth of new hope. In a turn of events that few dared to speculate, a local handyman named Gary Benson came forward to report something unsettling. He was known around town for his friendly demeanor and willingness to help, but his story carried a note of gravity that reignited the search. Gary had been fixing a fence in a nearby park when he noticed a group of teenage boys acting suspiciously, hovering furtively among the trees. It appeared to be discussing something intently. The moment struck as odd for him, and though he'd intended to dismiss it as youthful shenanigans, an uneasy feeling gnawed at his conscience. Days later, with news of Emma's disappearance heavy in the air, he finally decided to approach the authorities. Harris met with Gary in the town hall, sitting across from him at a small conference table cluttered with case files. The handyman described how, only days after Emma went missing, the boys had returned to the same area carrying a large, conspicuous object wrapped in a faded tarp. Gary recalled feeling frozen in place, an instinct to intervene tangled with the fear of confrontation. By the time he'd gathered the courage to walk toward them, they had dispersed, leaving him bewildered and afraid. "This is where it happened," Gary insisted, pointing on an old map at a thick area of woods near Crestwood. The same woods Emma loved to roam. As he spoke, hints of desperation flickered in his eyes. "I can't shake the feeling that they know something I should have said sooner." That evening, Detective Harris assembled his team, energized by the lead. The map became a focal point, their next destination laid out before them. Armed with renewed determination, they prepared for a thorough search of the area suggested by Gary. This time, the echoes of the past urged them on, promising that perhaps, just perhaps, the shadows would yield the truth they had sought for so long. It was a flicker of hope against an ever-cooling backdrop, a beacon calling them back into the depths of the forest, where long-hidden secrets awaited. The more they delved into Gary's claim, the clearer the path became, and Detective Harris could almost hear the pulse of an answer lurking just on the horizon. The suspect. A week after Gary's revelation, the air around Crestwood twisted with apprehension as Detective Harris and his team resumed their search in the dense woods. Armed with a renewed sense of determination, they combed through the very spot that Gary had described. The chill of late autumn lingering uneasily among the trees. The team split into small groups, methodically sifting through the underbrush and fallen leaves. Amid their searching, Officer Mark Reynoldson of the younger detective happened upon an unexpected find. Tucked beneath a gnarled root, barely visible in the murky ground, was a discarded cell phone. His pulse quickened as he pulled it free, dirt clinging to its case. The investigators gathered around, the buzzing silence amplifying as they exchanged glances. This could hold the key to a significant breakthrough. Forensics moved quickly to analyze the phone, revealing a history of texts and calls. As the information flowed in, a name on the screen began to surface repeatedly. Tyler Lawson, a boy who was known in town for his rebellious streak and rumored ties to illicit activities. He was a classmate of Emma's, someone whose social media presence brimmed with bravado, but by all accounts had been part of the teen clique that often made Emma feel isolated. Harris scrutinized the timestamps on the texts. They detailed conversations that hinted at turmoil cloaked beneath bravado. Messages between Tyler and Emma had escalated from banter to hostility. She had chastised him for his bullying behavior towards her friends, voicing her frustration in a way that was passionate and raw. A sense of entitlement wrapped around Tyler's threats. It was unsettling, an undercurrent of menace that cast a dark shadow over his demeanor. Questions multiplied as the detectives connected the dots. Did Tyler stand as one of Emma's closest associates, or had he crossed the threshold into something darker? When Harris and his team managed to track down Tyler for questioning, the boy's bravado fell away as he confronted their inquiry. His nervous laughter bounced off the walls of the interrogation room. Yet there was a flicker of something deeper, a defiance struggling against fear. Harris kept his gaze steady, studying Tyler behind the glass, mentally piecing together their suspicions. Had this boy witnessed something in the woods that day, or had he been an instigator in a scenario that spiraled out of control? The truth loomed large, menacing yet tantalizingly close. The more they interrogated him, the more it became apparent that beneath the bravado lay layers of complicity and deceit. This was no longer just a missing person case. It was a spiral into the depths of betrayal that had wrested so many young lives apart. The investigation had shifted, and with it, so had the stakes. The trial. As the winter thawed into early spring, the small town of Crestwood grappled with the shockwaves of Emma Russell's case coming to a head in the courtroom. The trial of Tyler Lawson was set to begin, and the atmosphere in the town hall was thick with a mixture of anticipation and dread. A sense of foreboding hung over the proceedings as residents filled the benches, all eager for answers, but fearful of the truths that might emerge. The courtroom buzzed with hushed conversations, and as the judge entered, conversations simmered down to a tense silence. Harris took his seat behind the prosecution's table as a sense of purpose steadied his breath. Tyler, youthful and defiant, sat across from him, flanked by defense attorneys armed with strategies meant to peel back the layers of culpability and protect their client. Witnesses were called forth one by one, with Emma's close friends detailing their memories of the days leading up to her disappearance. Each testimony rekindled the haunting echoes of their laughter and dreams, juxtaposed against the tragedy that had unfolded. Harris watched as Sophie struggled to recount the rift that had developed between Emma and Tyler, her voice trembling yet resolute when she spoke of the bullying that had permeated their lives. As the prosecution laid out its case, emotions ignited. They painted a picture of manipulation and rage, exposing Tyler's animosity toward Emma and the social dynamics that had shaped their interactions. They presented digital evidence, the texts, the messages laced with threats, his distancing from friends, and the growing hostility. Each piece fell like a heavy stone into the collective heart of the courtroom. Yet, as the defense turned to speak, a different narrative emerged that echoed through the chambers with its own rhythm. They portrayed Tyler as a troubled boy struggling to fit in, suggesting he was merely a scapegoat for a community desperate to lay blame. They questioned the reliability of the witness accounts and the nature of teenage relationships, asserting that adolescence was fraught with misunderstandings and inadvertent cruelty. As the trial progressed, cracks appeared in the armor of certain defense attorneys aimed to unearth any inconsistencies, casting shadows of doubt upon the very essence of the prosecution's case. Twisted interpretations of the events danced through the courtroom, leading to an overwhelming feeling of despair as the narrative shifted under the weight of conflicting stories. After days of impassioned arguments, the courtroom whispered with anxiety as the jury retreated to deliberate. Time dragged on as hope and anxiety intermingled in the hearts of Crestwood's residents. For Emma's family, the waiting felt interminable, each minute fraught with desperation to know the truth. Finally, the doors creaked open. The jury returned to the chamber. Faces were flushed with anticipation, hearts thudding like war drums. As the verdict was read aloud, the collective intake of breath signaled the moment of reckoning. Emotions erupted in waves, the echoes of justice crashing against the solid walls of a community forever transformed. In that pivotal moment, past and present collided the shadows of the case, grasping at the hearts of all who had grappled within its dark fold. The aftermath. The verdict echoed through the small town of Crestwood like a thunderclap, shaking the very foundations of its sense of security. Tyler Lawson was found guilty of an involuntary manslaughter, a ruling that generated murmurs across the packed courtroom, a mixture of anger, relief, and a haunting sense of sorrow enveloping the air. As he was led away in handcuffs, the weight of what had transpired began to settle over the residents, while Emma Russell's family felt their grief ripple into something darker. In the following weeks, Crestwood found itself plunged into a period of reflection. News outlets swarmed the story, framing it as a cautionary tale of teenage angst morphed into tragedy. Behind closed doors, families engaged in difficult conversations, grappling with the realities of bullying, peer pressure, and the fragility of innocent lives. Schools instituted more stringent anti-bullying policies, striving to empower students to speak up and combat the pervasive culture that had allowed Emma's hardships to thrive unchecked. But the echoes of the trial lingered in the air, shadowing the sunny days of spring. Emma's family, reeling from the loss and the complex emotions stirred by the court's decision, established a foundation in her name, aiming to raise awareness and offer support to other families who faced similar struggles. They shared her artwork and stories at community events, hoping to honor her spirit while igniting dialogues about mental health and the importance of compassion in the face of adversity. For Detective Harris, the aftermath bore the weight of a bittersweet victory. He had delivered justice, but at the cost of a young life, an impossibly difficult balance to strike. Conversations turned inward as he evaluated not just the evidence gathered, but the human stories behind the case. He initiated community discussions in town halls, encouraging connections among parents and teens, bursting the bubble of isolation that had grown since Emma's disappearance. Among the teenagers, unease settled into the cafeteria, where whispers of "you never know what someone is going through" served as both a warning and a reminder. Sophie found a quiet resolve in Emma's legacy, pulling together a group to support mental health initiatives, crafting art as a means of expression. It was a way to heal, to share the profound impact that empathy could have on lives entwined together. As summer rolled in, with its vibrant greens and a warm sun shining down on Crestwood, a delicate equilibrium began to weave its way into the chaos left behind. The importance of connection was etched permanently in the town's heart, a reminder of the shadows that had passed through, mingling with the light. Ultimately, the ripples of Emma's story took on a life of their own, a passionate call for change lingering sweetly in the air, a testament to hope amid the heartbreak. Reflection. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting orange and pink hues across the elm trees that lined Crestwood, the town found itself at the crossroads of healing and remembrance. Reflections of the past floated on the evening breeze, mingling with the laughter of children playing in the distant sea, bittersweet reminder of the innocence stolen far too soon. Sitting on the porch of her family home, Emma's mother, Barbara, had taken to penning her thoughts in a journal. Each entry began with a simple date, but transformed into profound ruminations about grief, love, and the lessons learned too late. One evening she wrote, "I often catch myself wondering who she would have become. The world lost more than a girl. We lost a shining light, and it's hard to reconcile that loss. But I hope every parent in this town feels the weight of their children's laughter, the heaviness of their silence." Community gatherings grew more prevalent, filling the town hall with renewed purpose. Conversations shifted toward understanding mental health, empathy, and kindness. Emma was woven into stories shared not just as a tragedy, but as a call to foster connection, to change the narrative of bullying, and to remind everyone that each individual's story is sacred. Detective Harris made it a point to visit those gatherings, mingling with families, attending workshops, and sharing insights from his journey through the heartbreaking investigation. He had witnessed firsthand how lives could intersect in ways that should never end in tragedy, Emma's legacy had become a vehicle for awareness, a determination that echoed through the corridors of schools and homes, urging everyone toward compassion. As the seasons changed and flowers bloomed anew, Crestwood reshaped its narrative. The lessons learned from Emma's story carried weight. They were etched into hearts, encouraging connection where once there had been division, love where there had been silence. It was in reflection that the community truly began to heal, not just for Emma, but for every young person struggling to find their place in the world. They had come to understand that their voices mattered, that there could be light after darkness, and that the journey toward understanding was one worth taking together.